I still trying to make sense of what I saw. Trump is the master showman. If you just want to see a good show, I thought he used his time well, all 2 hours of it, like Lord of the Rings. And God bless him.
It's like Wicked, man. It's long.
I mean, it's long. But the problem is, like Wicked, you go, it's like a fantasy, and then you come back home and you got to deal with reality. In the speech, he loves the military. In reality, he's cutting VA and throwing veterans out of work. In the speech, he loves cops. In reality, he's pardoning everybody from January 6th who beat the hell out of cops. In the speech, he holds up this cancer kid who everybody fell in love with. In reality, he's cutting cancer research. In the speech, he talks about a strong economy. In reality, it's terrorists and the stock market's in free fall. In the speech, he's got MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, and my good buddy Bobby Kennedy Jr. But in reality, there's measles ripping through Texas. There's more measles cases in Texas than there are transgender athletes in the country. So there's a speech which is fantastic, fantasy, and then there's a reality that's getting worse and worse. And Democrats have to figure out some way to close the gap in public perception on that.
Okay, you just said something there.
But
More measles cases in Texas than transgender athletes in the entire country. And yet he went back to the transgender issue again and again and again.
I mean, because it clearly resonates, right? It resonates across parties, across lots of lines, right? I mean, in fact, it sells. I mean, I spent a great deal of time with women who campaigned for Title IX their whole lives, right? And they made their lives on Title IX and getting women to where they were, and they feel like just
equal
patently,
funding for women.
Yeah, it's patently unfair what's been going on. So it's not just a Republican issue. Listen, I think what the president did masterfully here is use the gallery to tell the story, to weave the narrative about what they've accomplished and what they're looking to accomplish, right? By going up to the gallery and pulling people out and weaving their stories into the overall narrative. I think he did it probably better than anyone I've seen it do it in recent time. They had a lot of people up there, but I think they're all very useful in telling the story. And some of it was on the transgender, the woman who got, concussion, a head injury from getting the volleyball spiked in her head, to the woman whose daughter was raped and murdered by the gang members who are now classified as terrorists, to just you name an issue that he'd go up to the crowd and pull somebody down. And so he brought it in and made it very personable. And the reason that's important is because nobody consumes this other than us in like a 2-hour block.
In its totality.
But this is going to be consumed in bites and on Twitter and on Instagram Reels and in TikTok. And you're going to see that little Secret Service guy. And you're going to see the kid going to West Point. And those are going to just live for a long time. And the Democrats, you're going to see the angry, get off my lawn with,
Al Green
with the cane and Jack Crockett and the congressman there walking out. Like, nobody's paying attention to that, right? Well, so Trump wins the day in this, clearly, to me.
I thought it was notable, though, that, Trump spent a fair amount of time in the address, talking about the transgender issue, talking about some of these cultural issues that admittedly are 80-20 issues for him, if you look at the polling on some of this. And then you look at Elissa Slotkin in a purple state, in a purple town within a purple state, intentionally chosen for that reason, to be the backdrop of her speech. And she didn't touch any of that. She essentially tried to defang some of I think, what Trump does in being very divisive on these, or maybe I won't even say divisive because 80-20 issues, but being aggressive on these cultural issues. And she instead really tried to start to prosecute a case on the economy. She really started to, I think, take on Musk and Doge in a really direct way. She got at cuts to Social Security, which I think some of what Musk has said about Social Security is going to continue to bite him. And I would imagine Democrats are going to really pounce on it. So, I thought it was interesting to see the sort of juxtaposition, Trump kind of doing what he did successfully on the campaign trail. And at least the official Democratic response, was essentially, we're not taking that on. We're going to talk about how he's not doing what he said he would do on the economy. And I think there's a lot of potential in that.
So a couple of quick things. One, I take a backseat to nobody at this table or anywhere else about my admiration for Ronald Reagan, but I think the worst legacy of his presidency was using human beings as props in the gallery. He's the guy who introduced it. It's gotten wildly out of hand. I felt this way when Democrats do it, when Republicans do it, using these people. I have nothing but sympathy and empathy for the plight of some of these people, but it is turning into bread and circuses stuff, and it's getting wildly out of hand. That said, I think, look, this was a win for Donald Trump. I don't think there's any, to the extent it matters at all. I mean, remember, the last State of the Union, and I know the pundits union will not let us call this a State of the Union. We have to call it an address.
Joint session of Congress.
That said, these things typically do not matter. The last State of the Union, Joe Biden was all hopped up on B12 or whatever it was, and everyone said, "Fiery Joe, this proves he's ready for another 4 years." And what was it? 3 months later, he was out of the race. So, I don't think it matters very much. And in fact, I think the thing that may matter the most historically, that gets up in terms of what really has long shelf life, is if the markets keep responding to Trump's protectionism. Dow's down 1,300 points in 2 days.
Yep.
He's now said this is all going to really kick off on April 2. He's not backing down. He says we need tariffs to save the soul of this country, which I think is the most amazing mixture of romantic nonsense and economic illiteracy I've heard in a presidential speech in a long time. If we go into a total trade war and the world economy starts shuddering to a stop, the line you're going to hear Democrats play forever is there may be a little disturbance.
That's right.
Because
Yeah,
that's
a
the
little
thing that's going to say.
disturbance,
That's the thing.
So what you saw in this, I think, and what you're talking about, Kate, is the way I looked at it, Donald Trump got elected for two reasons, basically, to fix the woke and the broke, right? And so this speech was heavy on we're fixing the woke, we're doing all these things, right? And then what Kate's saying is you didn't really talk about fixing the broke though a lot, right? And I think that's what we're getting to here in the coming weeks and months is how do you fix the broke part, right? People want to see that pocketbook issue.
So far, zero answers.
Trying to
on
work
that.
on it.
Yeah.
Well, and so far, zero answers on that. A lot of this, being mean to everybody, you're not talking about the price of eggs and taking responsibility for things getting worse.
Today, we are standing by for President Trump to speak with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau amid trade war fears. Trump also today will meet with GOP lawmakers. CNN's Elena Treen is out the White House. What did last night tell you about how Trump is going to move forward? It was certainly a divisive conversation or speech, if you will.
No, you're right, Sarah. I mean, look, this was a classic Trump speech as someone who spent the last 2 years following him all over the country and listening to his campaign rallies. This sounded almost like a campaign speech. It was, defiant. It was very partisan, and it was very long. This was one of the longest joint addresses or State of the Union addresses. Essentially, that's what this was last night. In modern history, coming in at around 99 minutes. But there's a couple of moments that I really want to highlight here. And one is tariffs, because look, the president seemed very dug in on the tariffs that just 12 hours, or not even 12 hours earlier that day, had been enacted on Canada and Mexico. Now, despite what we've been hearing from some of his top advisors, including Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, the president did not seem very eager to want to roll them back or try to have further negotiations to change those tariffs. But at one point as well, he also acknowledged that, look, there are going to be some disturbances. He told Americans, and particularly farmers, singling them out, saying, bear with me. He added that there was going to be an adjustment period for the economy. And it comes as I know that yesterday, the president, but also many of his advisors, were closely monitoring the stock market reaction to the tariffs. We know that over the past couple of days now, we've really seen the stock market plummet on the news of that. So interesting as we continue to look forward to that conversation between the president and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau today. But another moment I want to highlight as well is immigration. This is actually the topic that the president spent the most time on, about 9 minutes and 49 seconds. But one of the most interesting moments of that part was that he appealed directly to Congress. He essentially said, I am frustrated and I need more money. He talked about how he campaigned on mass deportations of undocumented migrants in this country. But really, even though his border crossings are down, the deportation levels under his administration are basically in line with what we saw under the Biden administration. He told Congress, I need money. And this is really the crux of one of the biggest issues that the president faces, which is essentially he can sign executive orders every single day, but he needs Congress for the big things, including trying to get his tax cuts renewed and also on immigration. Then finally, I just want to quickly touch on Ukraine, because this was a moment that I knew his advisors knew was going to be one of the most closely watched moments of the evening. And he didn't make a huge announcement on Ukraine, but he did strike a more conciliatory tone toward Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He essentially said that he appreciated a letter that the Ukrainian president had sent him saying he was ready to move forward on that very important minerals deal. And he said, I just got it a little while ago, and essentially signaled that a deal could be coming on that in the coming days. So all of that kind of signaling where the president's focus is, Sarah.
All right. Thank you so much, Elena Treen, live for us from the White House there this morning.